I always believed trust was the bedrock of our marriage. For 7 years, I wore my wedding band with pride, convinced that my wife, Natalie, and I shared something unbreakable. But one ordinary Tuesday evening, as the September sun dipped below the suburban rooftops, a splinter of doubt lodged itself in my mind. It started innocently enough. Natalie had been distant for weeks. Longer hours at work, hushed late-night phone calls she dismissed as just a friend, and a new password on her phone she never used to guard. I noticed the changes in small doses. A missed dinner here, an unusually cheerful mood returning from what she claimed was a girls' night there. At first I told myself I was imagining things, that the stress from my own job was making me paranoid. Yet the gut feeling gnawed at me. In quiet moments, I caught her smiling at her screen, fingers dancing quickly to hide whatever conversation lit up her face. When I asked who it was, she answered a bit too casually, "Oh, just Karen from work. You don't know her." The lie was smooth, but something about her eyes as they avoided mine set off an alarm inside me. One night, I awoke to an empty bed. The clock glowed 2:13 a.m. A sliver of light shone from under the bathroom door, and I could hear her muffled voice. Natalie's side of the conversation was soft and careful, but a few phrases reached my ears. "I wish you were here," she whispered. My heart stalled. Who could she possibly be talking to like that at 2 in the morning? Certainly not Karen from work. I didn't confront her then. I lay there feigning sleep when she finally slipped back into bed. She curled up beside me as if nothing was wrong, her breathing steady in the dark. I stared at the ceiling, feeling a fissure crack open in the foundation of everything I thought I knew. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more damning than the last. Could it really be? No, I told myself. Not Natalie, not my wife, who always preached honesty and loyalty. There had to be another explanation. Perhaps a surprise party, a family issue. Any rationalization felt better than accepting the terrifying alternative. But once that seed of suspicion was planted, it sprouted rapidly, wrapping its tendrils around every aspect of our life. In the following days, I became hyper-aware. I noted the scent of a cologne not mine lingering on her clothes one evening. I saw the way she shielded her phone when typing in her PIN, a reflex of secrecy. And there were other things. A receipt tucked into her purse for an expensive dinner at a restaurant we had never been to together. A place across town. 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine on a night she told me she had to work late. Each clue by itself could be innocuous. Together, they painted a picture I couldn't ignore. I felt like a man staring at a puzzle where someone had swapped out all the pieces. The image that used to be clear and beautiful was now distorted and wrong. I began to feel a simmering anxiety whenever I was around her, as if the air between us was charged with a secret I wasn't allowed to know. One Friday, as we sat on opposite ends of the couch, Natalie scrolling through her phone and I pretending to read, I decided to test the waters. "You've been working late a lot recently," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "Everything okay?" My heart pounded as I awaited her response. She looked up, surprised, then offered a quick smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yeah, just the new project ramping up. You know how the boss can be." She set her phone down, stretching casually. "Why? Have I been neglecting you?" she teased, swinging her legs over my lap in a show of affection. I forced a chuckle and stroked her calf. To an outsider, we looked like a normal, loving couple having a playful exchange, but I could feel the tension under my skin, a tight wire ready to snap. "A bit," I joked. "Maybe I should file a complaint with your boss for hogging all your time." She laughed lightly and leaned in to kiss me. I kissed back, masking the hollowness I felt. Part of me hoped my comment would draw out a hint of guilt or a slip-up. Instead, she was as smooth as ever. If anything, my gentle prod only made her more attentive for the rest of the evening. She put her phone away, cuddled against me during a movie, even suggested we go out for ice cream like we used to when we were dating. It almost made me doubt myself. Almost. But the nagging signs were still there. The following morning when she showered, I took her phone from the nightstand. My hands trembled as I tried to guess the new passcode. Our anniversary? Number her birth date? Number after 3 failed attempts, I nearly threw the device in frustration, a surge of anger rising in my throat. But I stopped myself. Storming in and demanding answers right then would do no good. I needed to be sure. I needed proof. The truth was crouching in the shadows, and I was done ignoring it. I could no longer play the trusting fool while cracks spiderwebbed through our marriage. If Natalie was hiding something, or someone, I would find out. And if my worst fears were true, God help them both. My suspicions crystallized into a plan on a chilly Thursday night in early October. Natalie had announced that morning that she would be home late, yet another urgent meeting at work. The excuse rang hollow, echoing the many late nights that had piled up recently. This time, instead of swallowing the lie, I decided to act. Before dawn, I found myself in the garage installing a GPS tracker under the bumper of her car. My hands were steady, my jaw set with grim resolve. I had never invaded her privacy like this, and a part of me felt sick for even thinking it necessary. But that part was silenced by a louder voice repeating, "What if? What if? What if? What if she really is betraying you?" I needed to know, one way or the other. That evening, I pretended to head out for a quick run after work, kissing Natalie goodbye as she left for her meeting. Instead of jogging, I hurried to my sedan parked around the block, pulling up the tracking app on my phone. A small blinking dot moved across the map, heading not toward her office downtown but toward the outskirts of the city. My pulse thudded in my ears as I followed at a careful distance. The tracker led me to an upscale boutique hotel just off the highway. I parked on a side street, my mouth dry as cotton. From the shadows, I had a clear view of the hotel entrance. Minutes later, Natalie's car pulled in. I slunk lower in my seat, adrenaline and dread mixing into a nauseating cocktail in my stomach. She stepped out of her car, looking around nervously. My breath caught when a tall male figure emerged from the lobby. He walked straight to Natalie and wrapped her in a brief, all-too-familiar embrace. Even in the dim light of the hotel awning, I recognized him. Eric, her boss, the man I'd shaken hands with at her company's holiday mixer last year. The same charismatic smile I remembered from that night was now aimed at my wife as he brushed a strand of hair from her face. She smiled back at him in a way I hadn't seen in months, a tender, excited smile that used to be reserved for me. My vision burned at the edges. I fumbled for my phone, heart hammering, and snapped a photo through the windshield. It was grainy and dark, but there was no mistaking the intimacy in their body language. My hand shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. As they disappeared hand in hand through the glass doors of the hotel, a red haze clouded my mind. I clenched the steering wheel with white-knuckled force. In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to storm in after them, to tear the place apart, to confront them in a blaze of fury. My imagination conjured the scene. Natalie gasping in shock, Eric cowering or squaring up for a fight, my fists connecting with flesh, the taste of blood and tears and betrayal. The fantasy was so vivid I realized I'd slammed my fist into the dashboard. The dull ache in my knuckles grounded me, pulling me back from the brink. Not like this. A primal scream was building inside my chest, but I swallowed it down. If I burst in there, I'd have nothing but a moment of catharsis and a ruined chance to ensure this would cost them dearly. They'd know the jig was up. She'd lawyer up fast and hide whatever she could. My rage would give her a warning, and perhaps even paint me as the villain if things got out of hand. I couldn't afford that. I forced myself to breathe slowly, wiping the sweat from my brow. In the silence of my car, I tasted iron, realized I'd been biting the inside of my cheek so hard it bled. Instead of barging in, I waited. Every passing second was torture, images of what they were doing playing on a reel in my mind. I imagined their clothes strewn on a hotel room floor, her hair splayed on a pillow that wasn't ours, his hands on her body. My stomach churned and I pressed a hand against my mouth, afraid I might actually be sick. After what felt like an eternity, they reappeared in the lobby, arm in arm. I glanced at the clock on my dash. 2 hours had gone by, though it felt like a slow lifetime. I lifted my phone again, snapping another photo as Eric leaned in to kiss her goodbye at her car. The way she looked at him afterward, her fingers lingering on his arm, made my chest feel like it was being crushed in a vice. Natalie drove off, presumably headed home at last. Eric stayed back, walking to a black BMW with a confident stride. I took as many pictures as I could, him leaving the hotel, the license plate of his car, anything to corroborate what I'd just witnessed. When both cars had vanished into the night, I exhaled a long breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Then the weight of it all came crashing down. They were having an affair, my wife and her boss. It was real, laid out in pixels on my phone and burned into my eyes. I slumped back in the driver's seat, hands trembling violently now that the adrenaline was ebbing. Something inside me broke loose. A ragged sob or a shout, I'm not sure which, tore from my throat in the solitude of the car. I screamed until my voice cracked, slamming my palms on the steering wheel again and again. each thud punctuating the word that pounded in my head. Why? 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 In the dark silence that followed, I felt a cold clarity wash over me. My tears dried on my face, leaving tracks of salt and resolve. I had my proof. But this was only the beginning. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I drove around aimlessly for nearly an hour, letting my mind settle and solidify around what had to be done. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I had wiped all emotion from my face. Anger and heartbreak would not control me. They would fuel me. I was done being the hapless, betrayed husband. If they thought I would meekly accept this fate, they were gravely mistaken. That night, I slept in the guest room under the guise of not feeling well, unable to stomach sharing a bed with her. Natalie peeked in, concern in her eyes, asking if I needed anything. I muttered something about a work headache. She hesitated in the doorway, perhaps sensing something amiss, but eventually she left me alone. Good. In the still darkness, I stared at the ceiling, phone clutched to my chest like a loaded gun. I scrolled through the photos I took, each one stoking the furnace of my wrath. There they were, her slender frame pressed against him, his lips on hers. Undeniable. A part of me died looking at those images, but what rose in its place was something hardened and cold. Before exhaustion claimed me, I forwarded the evidence to a secure folder and backed it up to a USB drive, along with copies of her suspicious receipts and any emails I'd quietly collected from our home computer in recent weeks. I even saved the phone's tracking logs. I wanted an arsenal of proof, and I knew this wouldn't be the last time I gathered such ammunition. If a war was coming, I thought, as I shut my eyes, I damn well intended to win. The days that followed were a study in duality. Outwardly, I played the part of the mildly stressed husband immersed in work. Inwardly, I was methodically assembling the pieces of my vengeance. Every interaction with Natalie became an exercise in self-restraint. I woke up before her, went to bed after her, and avoided her gaze lest my eyes give away the fury boiling beneath. At breakfast the morning after the hotel, Natalie chatted about trivial things, the neighbor's new puppy, a sale at her favorite boutique, as I nodded mechanically. My coffee was bitter and scalding, but it was nothing compared to the bile I was swallowing down with each of her casual lies by omission. She didn't mention the late meeting, nor offer any details. Perhaps she thought I hadn't noticed her coming home even later than expected. Perhaps she believed I was truly the oblivious fool I had pretended to be. I left for work with a kiss on her cheek that burned like acid on my lips. The moment I was out of sight, my mask dropped. I drove not to my office, but straight to a downtown law firm whose number I'd pulled from our files. Years ago, at my parents' insistence, we had drawn up a prenuptial agreement before the wedding. At the time, I resented the implication. I loved Natalie and trusted her completely. Signing those papers felt like planning for failure. Now I thanked every star in the sky that we had them. The lawyer who handled our prenup, Richard Klein, was a silver-haired professional with a sharp gaze. I remembered him as a formality from 7 years back. As I sat in his polished conference room that morning, I realized I was gripping the armrests of my chair so hard my fingers went numb. Richard entered with a courteous smile that faded when he met my eyes. I must have looked as wrecked as I felt. "Michael, it's been a while," he said, extending a hand. I shook it, my grip harder than intended. "Richard," I managed, my voice tight, "thank you for seeing me on such short notice." He gestured for me to sit and took a seat across the table. "Of course. You sounded urgent on the phone. What can I do for you?" I took a breath, steadying myself. "I need to initiate a divorce," I said flatly. It was the first time I'd spoken the word out loud. Divorce. It felt surreal and yet empowering to say it with conviction. Richard's brows lifted a fraction, but he maintained his professional composure. "I'm sorry to hear that. You mentioned infidelity?" My jaw worked as I fought down a resurgence of anger. "Yes, my wife has been having an affair." I pulled out my phone, tapping to open the folder of evidence. Without a word, I slid it across the table. He donned his glasses and swiped through the photos silently. The images told the story. Natalie in another man's arms, the hotel, the time-stamped logs. Richard's face hardened slightly. "I see," he murmured. "I'm sorry, Michael." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak for a moment. When I did, my tone was like ice. "I want to proceed with the divorce in a way that leaves her with nothing more than she deserves, which is nothing." I remember there's an infidelity clause in our prenup. I need to know exactly how we can use it. Richard gave a small, grim smile. You remember correctly, the prenup does include a clause addressing adultery. Essentially, if either spouse commits infidelity, they forfeit any claim to spousal support and agree to an equitable distribution of assets favoring the innocent party. He scrolled to find the digital copy of the agreement, which I had emailed him on my way over. In plainer terms, assuming this holds up, Natalie would get no alimony, and the division of marital property would be skewed heavily in your favor. Given your higher income and the assets you brought into the marriage, she stands to walk away with very little beyond what she personally brought in or an initial token settlement we outlined. Despite the situation, I felt a measure of relief wash over me hearing that. It was exactly what I needed to confirm, but Richard raised a cautionary finger. Be aware, infidelity clauses aren't ironclad in every state. We're in a jurisdiction that generally allows them, but judges have leeway. We need clear evidence to enforce it. Your photos are compelling, but more proof is always better. Dates, times, correspondence, anything to establish the affair conclusively. I'll get you whatever you need, I replied without hesitation. I've already started gathering evidence. I told him about the receipts, the late nights, and that I'd seen them together with my own eyes. I left out the raw emotions, focusing on facts. Facts would win this war. He gave a satisfied nod. Good. Also, do you suspect any misuse of marital assets? Sometimes in affairs, one spouse spends joint funds on the affair. Gifts, trips, etc. If so, the court can credit that back in your favor or consider it in the split. I thought of the expensive restaurant receipt, the unexplained charges that I hadn't confronted her about. I have a few leads. I'll dig into our financial statements. She has a credit card on one of my accounts. I'll comb through those records for anything suspicious. Excellent. And one more thing, Richard said, folding his hands. Until we file, I advise keeping this close to the vest. Do nothing that might tip her off. No confrontations, no drastic financial moves she might notice, like closing accounts. We don't want her moving assets or prepping a defense. When we make our move, it should be swift and by surprise. His words aligned perfectly with my own thoughts. Believe me, she won't know a thing until I'm ready. We went on to discuss practical steps. Richard would quietly begin drafting the divorce petition, including the infidelity claims and prenup enforcement. He explained that once we filed and served her, an automatic temporary restraining order on assets would go into effect, standard in our state, to prevent either of us from moving money or property around. Until then, I needed to covertly secure anything that was mine and gather information on anything that was joint. I left the law office with a folder of papers and a determined stride. There was a long road ahead, but I finally had a roadmap for it. Over the next several weeks, my life became a balancing act. By day, I was the diligent husband and professional, keeping up appearances. By night, after Natalie fell asleep, I transformed into a detective and strategist. I installed discreet monitoring software on our home computer, which allowed me to see some of her messaging and emails when she forgot to log out. I bought a tiny voice recorder, and on nights when she sneaked off to make whispered phone calls in the bathroom or on the back patio, I tried to catch bits of her side of the conversation. Most of it was useless or muffled, but once I recorded her saying softly, "I can't talk long, he's downstairs," and on another night, a giggle followed by, "Miss you too." Hearing those words made my skin crawl, but I saved the audio file anyway, labeling it with the date and time. The GPS tracker remained tucked in her car, feeding me data whenever she went out. There were 3 more late meetings that month. Each time I quietly tailed at a distance, or sometimes I didn't even need to. She developed a pattern of visiting that same boutique hotel, or occasionally a different 1-2 towns over. It was their routine, it seemed, and it became mine to document it. I upgraded my evidence too. Once, I stationed myself in a coffee shop across from one rendezvous point, armed with a zoom camera I'd purchased under the guise of a new hobby. Through the lens, I captured crystal clear shots of them stealing kisses in her car and walking into a hotel with his hand on the small of her back. Every photo, every email printout or phone log I compiled meticulously in a hidden folder on a flash drive and an encrypted cloud backup. It was a secret journal of treachery, each entry strengthening my resolve. Meanwhile, I scrutinized our finances. Late one night, I pored over credit card statements spread across the dining table. There it was, expensive jewelry I never received, Hotel charges on weekends I was out of town for work, even a charge for a couple's massage at a spa. My hands trembled with rage as I highlighted each line item. Thousands of dollars of our money, my money, wasted on them. It felt like she was not only stabbing me in the heart, but twisting the knife by making me foot the bill for my own betrayal. I made copies of all those statements too, marking the suspicious expenditures. Richard would make sure they were brought to light. In those weeks, I barely slept more than a few hours a night. Coffee became my lifeline. At times, exhaustion and heartbreak would hit me like a wave, and I'd have to lock myself in the bathroom to quietly weep or punch a folded towel until I calmed. But then, I'd see Natalie blithely going about life, smiling at her phone, humming in the shower, and a dark determination would reignite within me. The duplicity of it all was astounding. She had no idea that behind my forced smiles, every moment I was cataloging her deceit and tightening the noose. To maintain my cover, I initiated small, plausible changes at home. I told Natalie that a big project at work might require me to travel more soon, hinting that my focus was on that. It gave me an excuse for any distractedness she might notice. I even feigned a minor illness one week, something to explain why I was a bit distant and not interested in intimacy. She didn't press much, which in itself spoke volumes. In the past, if ever I was under the weather or stressed, she would fuss and care for me. Now she seemed relieved to have me preoccupied. Perhaps it made it easier for her to slip away to her lover without my interference. Sometimes I wondered if she wanted to get caught, given how careless some of her lies had become. Or maybe she was just confident in my continued obliviousness. In any case, I took pains not to raise her suspicions. I was courteous, even warm at times. I still asked about her day, collecting her half-truths as another kind of evidence. I still shared meals with her, discussing plans for the holidays as though we had a future together. Each time I did, there was a strange hollow pain in my chest. This was the woman I had loved so deeply, and yet I felt like I was conversing with a stranger wearing my wife's face. Late at night, I sometimes hovered near her while she slept, gazing at her features in the darkness and wondering who she really was. The urge to shake her awake and confront her right then nearly overwhelmed me on more than one occasion. During one such midnight vigil, I realized tears were streaming down my face. I wiped them away fiercely. She wasn't worth my tears anymore, I told myself. She would earn something else from me, something far colder. One particular evening after returning from another work dinner, Natalie came home to find me in the living room sorting through old photo albums. It was an idea I'd had to throw her off balance, a little emotional manipulation of my own. I had laid out pictures from our happier times, our wedding day, vacations, anniversaries past. When she saw them, I noticed her face falter for a split second. "Feeling nostalgic?" she asked softly, stepping around the coffee table to join me. I offered a wistful smile, making sure my eyes looked a bit red as if I'd been emotional. "Yeah, I was just looking back on everything. How far we've come." She sat down next to me, picking up a photo of us from years ago, dancing in our kitchen. I watched her closely. Was that guilt flickering in her expression? Good. Let it haunt her. "We have had a lot of good times," she said, and I swore her voice had a quaver. If it was genuine regret or just discomfort, I couldn't tell. She placed her hand on mine. "Mike, is everything all right? You've been so quiet lately." There it was. The concern, the tentative probe. I had to be careful. I squeezed her hand gently. "I'm okay," I lied, turning to meet her gaze with practiced vulnerability. "I know I've been distant. Work has been on my mind and I don't know. Seeing these photos made me realize we haven't spent much time together lately. I miss it. I miss us." As I said the words, a part of me felt disgusted at the act, but another part took a twisted pleasure in it. This was planting a seed, a doubt in her mind about my awareness. Her eyes softened. I could see the mixture of relief and remorse she was juggling. If she only knew the truth behind my eyes at that moment, how every tender word I uttered was laced with poison. She leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder. "I miss us too," she whispered. A lie or a truth. It didn't matter. She was choosing her words carefully, that much I sensed. "Work has been crazy busy, but I think things will slow down soon. We should maybe take a weekend trip, just the two of us. Reconnect." My stomach turned at how easily she played the devoted wife while sneaking off to hotels when I wasn't around, but I kept my smile. "I'd like that," I murmured, kissing the top of her head. The scent of her shampoo was a cruel reminder of better days. "Let's plan something." She visibly relaxed against me. In that moment, I knew my tactic was working. By making her think I was craving closeness, perhaps even feeling guilty for being distant, I had flipped the script. Now she would be the one wondering if maybe her affair was a terrible mistake, that maybe she should recommit to our marriage. If I could stoke that doubt, she might hesitate, maybe even pull back from Eric temporarily. And if she did, it would lull her further into a false sense of security, believing her secret was safe and her home life salvageable. As we sat looking at those old photographs, I played the role of a husband grasping to save the marriage. Inside, I felt almost nothing. Just a dark, cold resolve and a faint flicker of grim satisfaction. Let her think I was still clueless and lovelorn. The longer I kept her in that state, the more unprepared she would be when I finally flipped the table on her world. Thus, piece by piece, I built the framework of retribution. I had the law on my side, evidence piling up, and a spouse who believed my worst flaws were a little workaholism and emotional withdrawal. If only she knew that behind that facade, her betrayals were being tallied like sins awaiting Judgment Day. And that day was drawing closer. It was a rainy Sunday in late November when I decided the time was right to confront the lie living under my own roof. By then I had all the evidence I needed, and more. The divorce papers were drafted and sat locked in my office drawer, awaiting only my signal to set things in motion. But there was one more act I needed to orchestrate, an emotional reckoning that would set the stage for the final blow. The day began quietly. Natalie and I moved around each other in our morning routine with a practiced domestic ease. She made omelets while I brewed coffee. We spoke of nothing important, the coming winter, a movie we might watch that night. I could barely stomach my breakfast, nerves coiled tight in anticipation of what I was about to do. Outside, rain pattered against the kitchen window, gray skies mirroring the weight in my chest. I had chosen this day carefully. The affair with Eric had cooled in recent weeks, likely due to my intentional closeness and her own guilt. She'd even told me 2 days ago that she planned to speak with HR about transitioning to a different team at work after the holidays, casually mentioning that it would be nice to have a fresh start. I knew what that meant. She was trying to distance herself from Eric without admitting anything to me, laying groundwork to stay in the marriage. It was almost pitiable. Almost. After breakfast, I suggested we spend the day at home together since the weather was bad. Maybe declutter the attic, one of those tasks we'd long put off. Natalie agreed readily, perhaps seeing it as another sign I was investing in us again. It was all going according to plan. We spent the morning rummaging through boxes, sharing memories as we found old keepsakes. It felt like a slow montage of our life. Ticket stubs from our first concert together, the guest book from our wedding, goofy photos from a costume party. Each memento was a knife twist for me, but I wielded them to accentuate the contrast between then and now. I wanted her awash in recollection and sentimentality before I lowered the boom. By early afternoon, we had made some progress in organizing, and we sat amid the clutter, taking a break. Dust motes swirled in the attic light as rain drummed on the roof above. "Thank you for pushing us to do this," Natalie said, sipping a cup of tea we'd brought up. She looked tired but content. "It's nice, going through these things together." I nodded, my heart pounding with the knowledge of what was to come. "It is," I said softly. My throat was dry. I set down my mug. "Nat, can we talk about something?" The way I said it must have caught her off guard. She set her tea aside, concern knitting her brow. "Of course. What's on your mind?" This was it. I felt a tremor in my hands and clasped them together. I had envisioned this confrontation countless times, imagined screaming at her, demanding answers, crying. But in the moment, an eerie calmness took over me. My voice when I spoke was low and controlled, almost too calm. "I know about you and Eric." The words hung in the air, heavy and lethal. For a second, Natalie didn't seem to process them. She tilted her head, puzzled. "What do you mean?" "Eric, from my office." My eyes locked onto hers, and I saw it. The flash of panic before she quickly masked it. "Please, don't insult me with denials." I reached into my back pocket and pulled out a single photograph, one I had printed days before in preparation. It was them, outside the hotel, her face upturned to his. I handed it to her. She took the photo with a growing tremble in her hand. I watched as her eyes registered the image. Her reaction was immediate, a sharp inhale, as if the wind had been knocked out of her. "Oh my God," she whispered. Her face went deathly pale, and for a moment I thought she might faint. I spoke into the stunned silence, each word measured and cold. I know, Natalie. I've known for weeks. Months, actually. Her eyes brimmed with tears instantly. Mike, she began, voice cracking. It's not. I can explain. Can you? I snapped, bitterness finally seeping into my tone. I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. Years of trust and affection were warring with the tidal wave of betrayal and anger inside me. Go ahead. Explain to me how my wife decided to crawl into bed with another man, how she lied to my face over and over. She stood as well, the photo fluttering from her hand to the floor between us. The sight of it there, like evidence at a crime scene, only fueled my anger. Her lip quivered. It just happened, she said weakly. I never meant. Never meant? I barked out a harsh laugh. Don't you dare say you never meant to hurt me. You knew exactly what you were doing every step of the way. All those nights you snuck around, all the lies about work. Did you think I was that stupid, Natalie? She flinched as if struck, tears spilling freely now. No, I don't know. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was stupid and selfish. You're damn right you were, I cut in, my voice rising. I was pacing now in the cramped attic, the years of carefully bottled fury starting to crack my calm facade. I gave you everything. I trusted you with everything, and you threw it back in my face for some fling with your boss of all people. Jesus, Natalie. She pressed her hands to her mouth, sobbing into them. I'm so sorry, she choked out. Mike, I'm so sorry. I had imagined her remorse, her tears, yet seeing them now did not soften me as it might have weeks ago. Instead, I felt disgust. At her, at the situation, even at myself for ever loving someone capable of this betrayal. Sorry? I echoed, my tone scathing. Now you're sorry because you got caught. Her shoulders shook. No, I was going to end it. I swear. I was trying to pull away. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you. The last words came out in a desperate wail as she reached toward me. I stepped back out of reach, seething. You have a hell of a way of showing love. Do you love me when you're with him? Did you tell him you loved him too? She shook her head fervently, hair whipping. It wasn't like that with him. It was a mistake, just a stupid, meaningless. Meaningless? My voice exploded on the word, echoing in the rafters. Don't treat me like a fool, Natalie. I saw you with him. I saw how you looked at him, how you kissed him. My throat closed up on that image, the pain slicing through the anger for a moment. I turned away, bracing my hands against an old dresser. I needed to keep control. This was all part of the plan, I reminded myself, even as genuine agony crept into my voice. Was it meaningless the first time you slept with him? Or the fifth? How many times, Natalie? How long have you been lying to me? She was bawling now, each question hitting her like a lash. It started a few months ago, she managed between sobs. I don't know. Maybe 6 months. It just happened. I never wanted to hurt you. I squeezed my eyes shut, the confirmation like salt in a gaping wound. 6 months? Half a year of my life spent in ignorant bliss while she played Judas behind my back. I wanted to throw something, to break every fragile item in this attic. Instead, I whirled around and fixed her with a glare. Were you ever going to tell me? Or were you planning to keep this going until you got bored of him too? She wiped at her cheeks, makeup smudging. No, I was ending it. I told him I couldn't do it anymore. That I want my marriage. I could hear sincerity mingled with desperation. Perhaps she truly had regrets now that reality was crashing down. I seized on that. If I hadn't found out, would you really have ended it? Or is this just convenient because now you have no choice? She opened her mouth, then closed it, unable to answer. Her silence was answer enough. We stood there, the only sound her quiet sobbing and the rain thrumming overhead. My chest heaved with rapid breaths. The moment of rage had peaked and now left a kind of hollow ache behind. This was the woman I had loved beyond measure, now a weeping mess begging for the life she'd carelessly shattered. I stepped closer, speaking in a low, trembling voice. Do you have any idea what you've done to me? To us? I would have done anything for you, Natalie. And you killed us. My voice broke despite my resolve, genuine tears springing to my eyes. They weren't planned, but they helped sell the truth of my devastation. She reached for me again, and this time I let her touch my arms, too drained to recoil. Mike, Please. I know I messed up. I know I don't deserve it, but if you can find it in your heart, I want to fix this. I'll do anything to fix this. I love you. I never stopped loving you. I stared down at her. She looked small, broken, nothing like the confident, radiant woman who had led a double life so skillfully. Was it all an act now, or was she truly repentant? In that instant, I felt a swell of conflicting feelings. Old affection struggling against the weight of betrayal. Part of me wanted to yell at her more, to fling her aside and walk out. Another part, maybe the wounded, lonely part, yearned to believe her, to cling to the idea that maybe our marriage could be salvaged. I let out a shuddering breath and slowly, I nodded. Anything? I asked softly. She seized on that like a lifeline, nodding repeatedly. Anything. I'll go to therapy. I'll quit my job. I'll never speak to him again. I'll prove it to you every day if I have to. Just, please, don't leave me. Don't throw us away. A bitter taste filled my mouth at her choice of words. I would be throwing us away? But I swallowed my ire. This was exactly where I wanted her. Remorseful, willing to do whatever it took on my terms. I loosened a tense breath as if relenting. I can't make any promises right now, I said, voice weary and broken. I'm hurt. I'm angry. I honestly don't know if I can ever trust you again. Fresh tears rolled down her face, but she nodded in understanding. I know. I know. You have every right to feel that way. I sank down onto an old trunk, suddenly exhausted. I buried my face in my hands. I can't just forgive this overnight, Nat. This isn't something that we can just patch up and move on from. She knelt down in front of me, her hands hovering near my knees, as if afraid to touch me without permission. I realize that. I'll wait as long as it takes. I need to know if there's a chance, even a small one. I stayed silent for a long moment, as if wrestling with myself. In truth, I was marshaling every bit of self-control to maintain the illusion of a man reluctantly willing to consider reconciliation. Finally, I lifted my head, meeting her pleading eyes. A part of me wants to pack your things and kick you out right now, I said truthfully, letting a flash of anger show. Then I moderated my tone. But another part. I looked away, letting my voice quiver. Another part of me can't imagine life without you, despite what you've done. She let out a broken sound, half sob, half relief. I don't deserve you, she said. I promise, I'll make this right. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if I have to. I nodded slowly, then set my jaw in a show of resolve. All right, here's what needs to happen if I'm even to consider giving us a chance. She straightened up slightly, hanging on my words. First, you quit your job, this week. Tomorrow, if possible. She opened her mouth, perhaps to protest about practicality, but then closed it and nodded vigorously. Okay, I'll resign. I'll find something else. Or, it doesn't matter. I'll do it. Second, I continued, you cut off all contact with Eric, permanently. I want you to block his number, delete every trace of him, and I want you to write him a message, right now, in front of me, making it clear it's over, and that he is never to contact you again. She blanched at that, maybe embarrassed or maybe dreading the confrontation with him, but she acquiesced. I'll do it. I pulled out my phone and placed it on the trunk beside me. Call him then. My voice was like steel. If there was any lingering part of her that hesitated, I needed to see it. Her eyes widened in panic. Call him, Mike, You said anything, I reminded sharply. So do it. Tell him it's over, right now, or I walk out of here and call a lawyer tonight. She believed the threat. I saw it in the way she scrambled for her own phone with shaking hands. Truthfully, I half expected her to balk or refuse. Part of me was ready to storm off if she showed the slightest resistance to cutting him loose. But she unlocked her phone, found his contact, and with a deep breath, pressed the button to call. I could hear it ring, and then a faint tinny voice as he answered. She put it on speaker at my gesture. My heart hammered, and I watched her closely. Eric, hi, she began, her voice wavering but determined. I can't talk long. She swallowed hard, then continued. I have to tell you that whatever this was, it's over. I made a terrible mistake. I love my husband and I want my marriage. I don't want you to contact me again. A pause. I could hear his voice, tinny and confused. Natalie, what are you saying? Is he there? Did he make you? She cut him off. It doesn't matter. I shouldn't have done any of it. It was wrong. Please, don't call me or try to reach me anymore. I'm deleting this number. Goodbye. Her voice cracked on the last word, but she hung up immediately without waiting for further response. Silence filled the attic except for the rain. My chest felt tight as I processed what I'd just witnessed. It was strangely satisfying and yet anticlimactic. She had obeyed without question, severing ties with her lover right in front of me. Natalie stared at the phone in her hand, then slowly looked up at me. Her face was etched with pain and shame. "I did it," she whispered. "I told him it's over." I nodded, maintaining a stern expression even as a small vindictive part of me savored the moment. "Good." She cautiously reached for my hand, and this time I let her take it. Her fingers were freezing. "Thank you," she said softly, "for giving me that chance. I know it doesn't fix anything yet, but I meant what I said. I'll do whatever it takes." I didn't squeeze back, but I also didn't pull away. "We'll see," I replied, voice hoarse. I stood up slowly, picking up the incriminating photograph from the floor and tucking it into my pocket. "I need some air," she nodded, wiping her face. "Of course. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. I love you, Mike." I didn't respond to that. I turned and descended the attic ladder without another word. As I reached the ground floor and stepped out onto our back porch, the rain-scented air filled my lungs. My heart was thrumming from the confrontation, the adrenaline still high. I felt shaky, but in that tremor was triumph. Stage 1 of the endgame was complete. She was exposed, remorseful, and now under the illusion that I might just forgive her in time. She had quit her job in essence, cast aside her lover, and was prepared to bend over backwards to atone. Lightning flickered in the distance, thunder rolling lazily across the sky. I closed my eyes and let a few cool drops of rain pepper my face. Inside, through the window, I could see Natalie slowly making her way down from the attic, clutching a tissue. The very picture of regret. She had no idea that the worst was yet to come. I allowed myself a single, grim smile in the darkness. She thinks this is the hard part, I thought, imagining her relief that I hadn't kicked her out on the spot. She has no idea. The weeks following our attic confrontation were a study in strained civility. On the surface, life in our house fell into a cautious rhythm. The tension between Natalie and me no longer stemmed from secrets hidden, but from truths laid painfully bare. In a twisted way, it was almost easier for me to act forgiving now that she knew I knew. I didn't have to hide my hurt, only the full extent of my intentions. Natalie, for her part, was practically walking on eggshells around me. True to her word, she resigned from her job within a few days. She told me her boss, her former boss now, was surprised and disappointed at her sudden departure, but she gave some excuse about needing to focus on personal issues. I imagine office gossip would fill in the blanks. It couldn't have been an easy move. She'd worked there for years. But she did it without complaint, likely hoping this grand gesture would show me her commitment to repairing our marriage. With her days suddenly free, Natalie poured her energy into being the model wife. It was as if she thought that by reverting to the attentive, caring partner she'd once been, she could erase what she'd done. She woke up early to make me breakfast despite knowing I barely picked at my food lately. She kept the house spotless, even tackled chores I'd long since taken over when her career got busier. She greeted me every evening with tentative, searching eyes, as if gauging whether I still dwelled in anger or had softened. I remained civil, even kind at times, but distant. I slept in the guest room more often than not, claiming nightmares or insomnia when she asked if I'd come to bed. In truth, I couldn't stomach lying next to her for more than a short while, though occasionally I forced myself to crawl in beside her in the early morning hours just so she'd wake with a glimmer of hope. On a couple of occasions, I heard her crying in the shower or saw her eyes red-rimmed after I returned from work. She tried to hide it, but I noticed. I offered lukewarm comfort, a gentle hand on her shoulder, which only made her cry harder in remorse. It was a perverse inversion of our roles, her broken and guilty, me consoling through my own pain. The old me, the one that loved her blindly, might have truly pitied her and rushed to reassure. The new me did it only to maintain the charade. Each tear she shed was, to my mind, a down payment on the devastation she owed. We talked, superficially, about us. At her urging, we scheduled an appointment with a marriage counselor for early January. After the holiday craziness, she said, she was careful not to push or demand anything. It was always framed as a suggestion, something we could do whenever I felt ready. I agreed to the counseling with a hollow nod, knowing full well we'd never sit on that therapist's couch together. December rolled in, and with it came the festive bustle of the holidays. Our neighborhood hung wreaths and lined roofs with twinkling lights. We usually hosted Thanksgiving for some friends, but this year we passed, citing my work schedule. Instead, we spent Thanksgiving Day quietly at home, just the two of us. Natalie cooked a small turkey and my favorite sides, trying to infuse some normalcy. We even managed polite conversation over dinner. If someone had looked in on us, they might have seen a couple enjoying a peaceful holiday, perhaps a bit subdued, but content. Only we knew the minefield under our words, each of us overly careful. I complimented the meal, she mustered a smile, but beneath the table, I was clenching my fists so hard at times I left crescent marks in my palms. That night, after cleaning up, she surprised me by bringing out a dusty bottle of our best wine from the cellar. To us, she offered timidly as she poured 2 glasses. To better days ahead, I hope. I clinked my glass to hers softly. To taking things one day at a time, I replied. It was the closest I'd come to acknowledging a future together, and I saw how much it buoyed her. Emboldened by the wine and perhaps the cozy flicker of the fireplace, Natalie scooted closer to me on the couch. She rested her head on my shoulder, her touch light, as if unsure of its welcome. I stiffened involuntarily, but forced myself to relax. This, too, was part of the act. After a moment, I wrapped an arm around her. It felt simultaneously strange and achingly familiar to hold her like that. For a few minutes, we sat in silence. The only sound the crackle of logs and the clink of our glasses when we took sips. I am so thankful for you, she whispered eventually, almost to herself. I don't know how you can even look at me after what I did, but I'm so grateful you are. Her voice hitched. I promise I'll spend every Thanksgiving making you feel as loved as you deserve, if you'll let me. My throat tightened, and I had to close my eyes. Whether it was from anger or some buried love, or just the sheer emotional toll of it all, I felt a sting there. I gently kissed her forehead, a gesture that could be seen as affection or a sad comfort. Let's just get through one day at a time, I repeated softly. She nestled against me, and for a fleeting instant, an observer might think we'd reconciled. In her heart, maybe she believed we were on our way. In mine, the countdown had started. Because earlier that week, I had given Richard, my lawyer, the green light. The divorce petition was finalized and sitting in his office, complete with evidence exhibits and our prenup ready to enforce. The plan was set. On a day of my choosing, perhaps when she least expected, the papers would be served swiftly. I decided on mid-December, just before the holiday. A merciful man might have waited until January, sparing her Christmas heartbreak. But mercy had long left my vocabulary. Instead, I imagined how the festive season, once her favorite time of year, would forever be tainted by the memory of what was coming. A dark part of me reveled in that thought. The chosen day arrived, a Friday evening 2 weeks before Christmas. I came home a bit earlier than usual, carrying a heavy heart I had meticulously rehearsed. Natalie was in the living room, hanging ornaments on our Christmas tree. She looked up with a warm, tentative smile when I entered. You're home early. I was just finishing up the decorations. How does it look? The tree twinkled with white lights, adorned with ornaments we'd collected through our marriage. A ceramic heart with our wedding date, a little house commemorating the year we bought our home, and countless others tied to memories. The sight of it was almost enough to give me pause. Almost. It looks beautiful, I answered quietly. I stood there watching as she delicately adjusted a ribbon. She seemed more at peace than I'd seen her in a long time, as if daring to believe we had turned a corner. The thought infuriated and invigorated me in equal measure. Can we talk for a minute? I asked, doing my best to inject a note of solemn earnestness. She turned, immediately apprehensive. Perhaps in the past weeks, any serious tone from me still triggered her fear that I'd changed my mind about forgiving her. In a way, she was right. Of course, she said softly, stepping toward me. Everything okay? I gestured to the sofa. We both sat, facing each other. I took her hands in mine gently. They were warm, and I felt a faint tremor. She was trembling just slightly. I wondered if she could feel the slight shake in my own grip. I've been doing a lot of thinking, I began, staring down at our joined hands as if gathering courage. About us. About what happened, and what should happen now. She bit her lip, bracing herself. All right. I looked up, meeting her eyes. You know I was devastated by what you did, I said quietly. And I still am. I don't think a day has gone by that I don't feel that pain, but I meant it when I said I didn't know if I could live without you. Her eyes glistened. She squeezed my hands. I meant what I said too, Mike. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. I nodded slowly. These last few weeks, seeing you try so hard, giving up your job, everything, I won't lie, it's made a difference. It showed me that maybe you truly regret it. I do. I regret it more than anything I've ever done, she whispered. I withdrew one hand to reach into my inside jacket pocket. Her eyes followed the motion, confusion creasing her brow as I pulled out a thick envelope. I could almost hear her heartbeat quicken in the silence. That's why this is so hard, I continued, my tone turning sad, even apologetic. Because no matter how much I want to, I can't get past it. I set the envelope on her lap. The moment her fingers touched it and felt the heft and stiffness of the documents inside, something in her expression cracked. Mike, what is this? She asked, her voice unsteady, but I think she already knew. Open it, I said softly. Hands shaking, she unsealed the flap and pulled out the stack of papers. I watched her eyes scan the first page. Petition for dissolution of marriage. The words might as well have been written in blood for how they drained the color from her face. Her voice came out in a strangled whisper. No, no, Mike. She flipped pages frantically, as if seeking something that would tell her this wasn't what it looked like. As she reached the section detailing grounds, she stopped. I knew what it said. Adultery. Natalie looked up at me, horror and heartbreak twisting her features. You said you were going to try, she gasped. I felt a pang in my chest at the raw despair in her voice, but I steeled myself. My part to play now was the man who tried but ultimately couldn't forgive. In truth, that wasn't far from reality. I did try, I answered, letting genuine sorrow mix with quiet fury. I tried to find a way to live with it, but I can't, Natalie. Every time I look at you, I see you with him. I hear the lies. It's destroying me. Tears poured down her face as she shook her head violently. We were doing better, I thought. I thought we had a chance. I released her other hand and stood up, unable to feign calm sitting beside her any longer. A chance? How? How could you think that after what you did? I motioned to the papers she clutched. This is the consequence, Natalie. What did you expect? She rose as well, the papers sliding off her lap onto the floor between us. I hoped you loved me enough to work through it. The depth of pain in her eyes was excruciating to witness. Her voice broke. I have been trying so hard. I quit my job. I cut him off completely. I've done everything you asked. And I appreciate that, I said, my tone icy, but it doesn't undo what you did. It doesn't unbreak my heart. The cliché line came out quietly and I meant it. She reached for me, a reflex, but then withdrew, realizing how unwanted her touch was in that moment. Instead, she clasped her hands together pleadingly. Please, please, we can still go to counseling. It hasn't even been that long since it all came out. I know you're still hurt, but if we give it more time. I shook my head firmly. Time won't fix this. Maybe I thought it could, but I was kidding myself. Some betrayals are just too deep. She let out a small wail and covered her face with her hands, sobbing. Don't do this, Mike, please. I'm begging you. Her words dissolved into cries muffled by her palms. A cold, detached part of me watched her break down and noted that this was the most shattered I had ever seen her. More than on the day in the attic, because then, she still had hope. Now, I was extinguishing it. I forced myself to speak calmly. I've already filed. A process server will deliver you an official copy tomorrow, but I thought I owed it to you to tell you myself, face to face. She dropped her hands, staring at me in disbelief and anguish. Owed it to me? She repeated, almost a hiss. You pretended to give me hope. You let me think we were going to survive this, and all this time, you were planning to divorce me? The flicker of anger in her eyes was new, cutting through her despair. How could you? After everything I've done these past weeks to make it right, that snapped something in me. To make it right? I echoed, incredulous. You think a few weeks of playing the dutiful wife erases what you did? There is no making it right, Natalie. This is justice. Her mouth fell open. Justice? You think I'm cruel for this? I'm not the one who betrayed our vows. I'm simply holding you accountable. She sank back down onto the couch as if her legs gave out, sobbing anew into her hands. I stood over her, my emotions swirling in a tempest. Triumph, anger, a hollow sadness. After a minute, I spoke more quietly. I didn't want to hurt you, I lied, softening my tone. I can't live like this. I deserve better. Her head snapped up, eyes red and wide. In a cracked voice, she said, "We could have been better. I could have made myself worthy of you again if you'd just let me try longer. Instead, you're throwing me away like garbage." I felt a flash of genuine irritation at that. "Don't turn this on me. You threw us away when you chose him. Did you think there would be no fallout, that I'd just forgive and forget like it was nothing?" She looked at me as if I were a stranger. Perhaps in that moment, I was. "No," she whispered. "I knew you'd never forget. I just hoped you'd find it in your heart to forgive. Because I love you." I closed my eyes for a moment, steadying myself. Her pleas were dwindling now into a resigned sorrow. It was almost over. "If you love me, you'll sign the papers and spare us both more pain," I said, each word deliberate. Her shoulders shook as she let out a disbelieving laugh through her tears. "That's what you want? For me to just sign it away? 7 years? Gone? Just like that?" It wouldn't be just like that, of course. There would be months of legal procedure ahead. But I didn't say that. Instead, I leaned down and gathered the papers from the floor, stacking them neatly. I placed them back into the envelope and set it on the coffee table in front of her. "Read them. You'll see the prenup clauses highlighted. It spells out what you keep and what you don't." She eyed the envelope like it was a snake. "The prenup," she murmured bitterly. Of course you'd use that." My voice hardened again. "You signed it in case you've forgotten, and now it's time to make good on it." Her jaw trembled. I remember you apologizing for even asking me to sign it back then, saying you'd never need it. It was just to appease your parents." I did recall that. In our wedding year, I'd felt almost guilty making her sign. How ironic that it was now my shield. I shrugged off the sentiment. "Well, it exists for a reason, in case of worst-case scenarios, and I'd say this qualifies." She closed her eyes, tears leaking out. "So that's it. You're just done with me." I stared at her for a long moment. "Yes," I said, finality in my tone. "I am done." A silence fell, broken only by the faint hum of the furnace kicking on. The twinkle lights on the tree blurred in my vision as I realized my own eyes were damp. I blinked and looked away. This needed to end now. "I'll stay at a hotel tonight," I said quietly. "Give you some space, and give myself space from her grief, which was starting to claw at cracks in my armor I hadn't known were there." She didn't reply, just hunched there, face in her hands once more, sobbing softly. I grabbed a small overnight bag and wordlessly packed a few essentials. As I headed for the door, I paused. Part of me wanted to say something, some final words of closure or apology even, but nothing seemed adequate or true. Instead, I left without another word, the door closing with a soft thud behind me. In the car, I allowed myself a moment to breathe. My hands were trembling on the steering wheel. I had done it. The trap was sprung, and as much as I had anticipated this moment, planned it to the letter, I was struck by a wave of emotion I hadn't fully expected. It wasn't regret exactly, but a heavy sorrow mixed with vindication. I thought of Natalie crumpled on the sofa, the divorce petition in front of her like a death warrant. The image of her shattered expression played in my mind. For a fleeting instant, I wondered if I'd gone too far, if any of this truly made me feel better. But then I remembered every lie, every hotel meetup, every ounce of agony she put me through. I firmed my resolve. This was necessary, I told myself. This was justice. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the house that had so recently been a home. Behind me, through the living room window, I could just make out the glow of the Christmas tree. I did not look back again. Once the divorce was set in motion, any pretense of amicability between Natalie and me disintegrated. She hired an attorney of her own, a high-priced divorce lawyer named Cynthia Webb, known for fighting tooth and nail for her clients. I expected nothing less. Natalie was desperate and hurt. She was going to battle for whatever scraps she could get, prenup or not. The weeks that followed my departure from our home were consumed by legal maneuvers. I moved into a small furnished apartment downtown, a place to lay my head while the storm raged. We communicated only through lawyers now. Every few days, Richard would call or email me with an update or a question, providing this financial document, responding to that accusation. And accusations there were. Early on, Cynthia filed a motion challenging our prenuptial agreement. She argued it was unconscionable, and that enforcing the infidelity clause would leave Natalie with undue hardship. Especially, she noted, since Natalie had sacrificed her job at my request during a period of attempted reconciliation. When I read that line in the motion, I felt a surge of vindictive satisfaction. To see it acknowledged in black and white that she quit her job for me, even if the context was twisted, underscored how thoroughly I had turned the tables. Richard was unconcerned by their arguments. "It's a long shot," he assured me. "The prenup was properly executed, and our state generally upholds them. The infidelity clause might raise an eyebrow with the judge, but given the evidence of her affair and the fact that she initiated the breach, we have a strong position." We were asked to attend mediation, a standard step to see if we could settle out of court. That session was terse and fruitless. We sat in a conference room, Natalie and her lawyer on one side, me and Richard on the other, a neutral mediator shuttling between us after brief opening statements in the same room. I could barely look at her. She appeared drawn and thin, a shadow of her formerly confident self. Meanwhile, I maintained a stony, impassive demeanor. Cynthia presented their proposal. They wanted to invalidate the infidelity clause and split assets evenly, or at least a more fair distribution, given the length of the marriage. They also hinted at requesting spousal support despite the clause, citing that Natalie was now unemployed and claiming I had manipulated her into that situation. Richard, with my approval, countered with a very different stance. The prenup stands, meaning she leaves with only what was agreed upon, essentially her personal savings, which were modest compared to mine, her car, and a small one-time payout we had set in the contract. No alimony at all. I was even willing to let her keep any personal items, jewelry, etc. that were gifts from me, though ironically some of those I suspected had been sold or pawned to fund her affair, a point we had in our pocket if needed. Needless to say, the mediation failed. Natalie barely spoke during it. When she did, her voice quivered with restrained emotion. At one point, she directly addressed me across the table, breaking protocol. "Mike, please, this doesn't have to destroy us both. We can find a middle ground." I leveled a cold gaze at her. "You destroyed us long before this process began," I replied. Her eyes flashed with hurt and anger. That was the last time she tried to speak to me directly. With settlement off the table, the divorce pressed forward into the discovery phase. This was where each side exchanged evidence and took depositions to build their case. My collected arsenal of proof left little dispute about the affair itself. Photos, text records, hotel receipts. It was all there, a chronology of infidelity. Faced with this, Cynthia opted not to contest the fact of the affair. Instead, their strategy pivoted to mitigating it, downplaying its duration and significance, and attacking the prenup as unfair in light of our current circumstances. They painted me as a vindictive husband, using a youthful mistake to crush my wife financially. The irony would have been laughable if I weren't so deeply entrenched in the fight. One chilly afternoon in late January, Natalie was deposed in Cynthia's office. I attended alongside Richard. Entering that room felt surreal. It was the first time I'd seen Natalie in person since the failed mediation over a month prior. She was dressed in a conservative navy suit, hair neatly pulled back, but I could see the toll this had taken on her. There were dark circles under her eyes, and she fiddled with a tissue in her hand even before the questioning began. The court reporter swore her in, and then Richard methodically went to work asking questions as I silently observed. At first, the questions were routine. State your name, your marriage date, etc. Then, inevitably, we turned to the affair. "Mrs. Walker," Richard began, his tone professionally neutral, "please state the name of the person with whom you had an extramarital affair." Natalie swallowed. "Eric Thompson," she answered quietly. "And Eric Thompson was your supervisor at work, correct?" "Yes, he was my direct manager." Across the table, I saw her lawyer tense slightly, anticipating where this was going. "For how long did your affair with Mr. Thompson last?" Natalie hesitated. Her lawyer had likely coached her. "A few months," she said. I noticed she didn't specify further. Richard glanced at some notes. "You need to be more specific, Mrs. Walker. On the record, approximately how many months? When did it start, and when did it end?" She unfolded the tissue nervously. "It started around June of last year, and it ended in November." I maintained a poker face, but inside I noted the convenience. June to November. 5 months. If I hadn't gathered evidence of earlier signs, she might sell it as shorter. I recalled suspicious behaviors as far back as spring, but I had no solid proof prior to summer when the hotel visits began, so Richard didn't challenge the start date immediately. And when in November did it end? He asked. She glanced up fleetingly, eyes flicking toward me then away. The day my husband found out. Late November. So, just to clarify, it ended not by your choice initially, but because your husband discovered it, correct? She winced. I had been trying to end it, she said softly. Ma'am, please just answer the question directly. Did the affair end because your husband discovered it? A tiny pause. Yes, Richard nodded. During the course of this affair, did you and Mr. Thompson meet at hotels? Her lawyer objected to the detail as irrelevant beyond establishing infidelity, but Richard pressed, arguing it went to the expenditure of marital funds and the deliberate nature of the conduct. The mediator agreed to let him proceed. Yes, Natalie answered, cheeks burning red. We met a few times. At hotels. Were these encounters paid for with marital funds? For example, who paid for the hotel rooms? She closed her eyes for a moment. He did, sometimes. Sometimes I did. We didn't really keep track. I could tell this line of questioning deeply embarrassed her. Good, I thought grimly. Richard slid forward copies of credit card statements. Let me show you what's been marked as Exhibit 14. He pointed to specific lines. These are charges at the Grand Oak Hotel on August 14th for $220, and the Pinewood Inn on September 10th for $180. These were on your credit card, which was linked to a joint account with Mr. Walker, correct? She looked at the documents, her hands visibly shaking now. Yes, they are, she murmured. So, on at least those occasions, you paid for the hotel rooms using marital funds. Is that right? Her voice was barely audible. Yes. I could feel secondhand humiliation radiating from her. Once, I might have felt pity. Now I only felt a dark satisfaction and a desire to see this through. Richard continued. Aside from hotel stays, did you spend any other marital money on Mr. Thompson? Gifts, trips, meals? Her lawyer objected again, but we had the receipts. Another exhibit contained the highlighted purchases, the jewelry, the spa, dinners. Natalie opened her mouth, maybe to deny it, but seeing the evidence before her, she resigned herself. I paid for some dinners. A watch for his birthday. Her eyes welled with tears, voice cracking. I know it was wrong. She looked like she might break down, and her attorney called for a short break under the guise of letting her client collect herself. The court reporter paused, and Natalie rushed out to the restroom. I stayed seated, my jaw tight. This was almost too easy. Cynthia turned to us and whispered harshly, This is nothing but character assassination. You've proven the affair. You don't need to rub her face in it. Richard responded calmly, just establishing the extent of marital waste and misconduct, counsel. It's all fair game given your client is asking for equitable consideration outside the prenup. Cynthia glared and went to check on Natalie. I could hear faint sobs from the corridor. Richard leaned toward me. How are you holding up? He asked under his breath. I'm fine, I said, eyes fixed on the empty chair where Natalie had been. And I was. Watching her squirm under oath wasn't pleasant, but it didn't hurt me. Not like it would have a couple months ago. If anything, each tear of hers felt like a small repayment. When Natalie returned, we resumed. Cynthia kept her hand on Natalie's shoulder in solidarity. Richard wrapped up with a few final questions. Mrs. Walker, earlier you testified the affair lasted from June to November. Are you certain about when it began? She blinked, perhaps sensing a trap. To the best of my recollection, yes. If someone were to have evidence that it started earlier, say, flirtatious emails or messages from April or May, would that refresh your memory? We didn't actually have a smoking gun from April. The earliest clear evidence was the late June messages. But Richard bluffed, and I saw Natalie's composure falter. I'm not sure. I mean, the physical relationship didn't begin until June, she clarified quietly. But there were emails or emotional entanglement prior to that. She looked at her attorney, who gave a slight nod indicating she should just answer. We started flirting maybe in May, she admitted, voice small. It wasn't physical until June. I noted that down silently as one more lie, or half-truth, corrected under oath. Not a major point legally, but it showed her willingness to minimize. Finally, Richard hit the point about reconciliation. After your husband discovered the affair, he remained in the marital home for several weeks, correct? Yes, she answered, dabbing her eyes with the tissue. And during that time, he indicated a willingness to try to reconcile. True. Cynthia shot me a look, well aware this line could imply he condoned the affair or forgave it initially. She likely planned to use that to argue the prenup clause shouldn't apply because he didn't immediately seek divorce, the condonation concept some courts recognize. Richard anticipated this and preempted. Did Mr. Walker ever say he forgave you? Natalie looked at me across the table, the first direct eye contact we'd had in this deposition. I kept my face blank. Not explicitly, no, she said. He asked you to quit your job, correct? Yes? And to cut contact with Mr. Thompson. Yes? You agreed to those terms, hoping to repair the marriage? I did. You yet Mr. Walker ultimately filed for divorce 2 weeks later, correct? Yes. During those 2 weeks, was he ever intimate with you? She flushed at the personal nature. I felt my own face heat slightly, recalling that aside from a few chaste kisses or holding her, I'd kept my distance. No, she said. Did he ever say he was giving you a second chance, or was it more that he was undecided and needed time? She thought for a moment. He said he needed time. He never outright said, I forgive you. Richard made a note. That was important to fend off any claim that I had fully condoned the adultery. He wrapped up shortly after. Cynthia asked some questions of her own on cross-examination, trying to emphasize my calculated approach. Natalie, when your husband confronted you in the attic, did he tell you he might consider forgiving you? He said he didn't know, but he implied there was a chance. And in those weeks after, was he acting lovingly at times toward you? For instance, spending Thanksgiving together, discussing counseling, even being affectionate? Yes, she replied, a slight bitterness creeping into her tone. So is it fair to say you were under the impression that your husband was open to reconciliation during that period? It was my hope, yes. Cynthia nodded and shot a glance my way, as if to say, see. You led her on. Legally, she was laying groundwork to claim I misled her, or trapped her, though emotionally that had no bearing on contract enforcement. But maybe they aimed for pity. After the deposition, we walked out into the cold winter air. I exhaled and noticed my breath shakily forming clouds. That had been intense. But we left with Natalie's admissions and lies pinned down. A few weeks later, Eric Thompson was deposed as well. He looked markedly less suave than the last time I'd seen him. There were rumors he'd been demoted after HR got wind of the affair. In fact, I'd made sure of it. Shortly after filing for divorce, I'd anonymously sent an envelope to the CEO of their company containing the very pictures of their hotel rendezvous and a copy of the company policy on fraternization. As a result, Eric had quietly been forced to resign under moral turpitude clauses. I learned through a contact that his wife, yes, he had a wife and 2 kids, something Natalie may or may not have known, was now also divorcing him. He had a lot on his plate. In his deposition, he was sullen but cooperative. Under oath, he corroborated everything. The dates, the expenses, even that Natalie had told him she was trying to reconcile with me in those final weeks and cut him off at my insistence. Cynthia tried to spin that as me exerting undue influence, but it only reinforced that Natalie willingly agreed to those terms. In a dramatic moment, Richard asked if Eric had ever promised Natalie any future together or any financial incentives. Eric denied it, looking uncomfortable. I suspect he was truthful there. Theirs had been an affair of convenience and lust, not some grand romance. By the time we headed to the courtroom for the final hearing, my case was ironclad. Natalie's team had one last gambit, painting me as merciless and trying to appeal to the judge's sense of equity. They submitted briefs arguing that enforcing the prenup fully would leave Natalie with almost nothing, accusing me of luring her into a false sense of security post-affair, only to strike when she was most vulnerable. A characterization I privately conceded wasn't far from the truth. They begged the court to deviate from the prenup on grounds of fairness, citing that the economic partnership of our marriage was longer than our initial circumstances had predicted, and that she had contributed to our household in other ways. But the law was on my side. Adultery, even in our no-fault state, could still be considered in distribution if explicitly contracted in a prenup, and the evidence of her affair, and by contrast, my fidelity, loomed large over every argument they tried to make. The day of the final hearing arrived in early spring. It was the culmination of everything, months of strategic battle, sleepless nights, and icy resolve. I took the stand at one point to testify to a few matters, that I had upheld my end of the prenup's financial disclosures, and that I hadn't coerced her to sign, disputing their duress claim. When Natalie took the stand, it was brief. Her lawyer mainly had her assert that she signed the prenup willingly, but Never imagined it would be used this way, because she had trusted our love. It was a pitiful attempt to sway emotion, and the judge remained impassive. In my testimony, I did what I needed to. I told the court calmly how I discovered the affair and how it devastated me. I admitted I tried to reconcile but ultimately could not. I spoke of the financial deceit as well, how I found out she had spent money from our accounts on her liaison. I kept my tone measured, respectful, but firm that I believed the prenup should be honored because that was the agreement we made entering the marriage. Under cross-examination, Cynthia tried to rattle me. "Mr. Walker, would you characterize your decision to attempt reconciliation as genuine, or was it a ploy to set your wife up?" My attorney objected to ploy, but I chose to answer. I looked straight at Natalie, who was watching me with an inscrutable expression from the counsel table. I genuinely hoped I could forgive her, I said slowly. I loved Natalie. I thought, maybe foolishly, that if she showed true remorse and changed, we might salvage things. But I realized I couldn't get past what she did. That's why I filed for divorce. It wasn't the full truth, but it wasn't entirely a lie either. Perhaps a part of me did wish, deep down, that none of this had happened, that I wouldn't have had to become this vengeful man. But that part was buried under layers of justifiable wrath. Cynthia pressed on. "So those conditions you placed, making her quit her job, cut off Mr. Thompson, if you were so set on divorce, why insist on those?" I glanced at the judge, then back to her. Because at the time, I hadn't decided for certain to divorce. I was deeply hurt and didn't want her near the man who broke my marriage. I also didn't want her continuing in an environment where the affair had happened if we were to have any chance. It was non-negotiable for me to even consider staying. She raised an eyebrow. Non-negotiable conditions that conveniently also left Mrs. Walker without income or employment right before you served her. Richard objected that her statement was argumentative. The judge sustained it, and I didn't have to respond. But inside, I didn't feel shame. Yes, it was convenient. It was part of the plan. Finally, both sides made closing remarks. Cynthia argued passionately that while Natalie erred, she had paid a steep price, losing her job, her reputation, for it was known in her professional circle why she left, and possibly facing financial ruin. She urged the judge to not compound a personal tragedy with a draconian financial sentence, painting me as out for blood. Then Richard calmly reiterated the facts: a clear contract, a clear violation by Natalie, and a husband who had upheld every part of his vows until forced to protect himself. He noted that any leniency would effectively reward the infidelity and punish the wronged party. I watched the judge's face. He was a stern, middle-aged man who had likely seen countless ugly divorces. His gaze moved between Natalie, sitting with head bowed, eyes red, and me, upright and stoic. After a heavy pause, he gave his ruling. The prenup was valid. The infidelity clause was enforceable under our state law, given the evidence. There would be no alimony, assets would be divided as per the agreement. She would keep her personal savings, a fraction of our total assets, and whatever personal property was hers. But the bulk of the marital assets remained mine. The judge did have discretion on one item: the home. The prenup had listed it under my separate property since I bought it before marriage. Though she had some equity claim for contributions, he awarded the house entirely to me, citing the circumstances, with a small offset payment to her for fairness, an amount negligible compared to its value. With the strike of a gavel, it was done. In a matter of minutes, 7 years of marriage were reduced to legal lines in a decree. I glanced over at Natalie. She looked shell-shocked. Cynthia was whispering something to her, likely about next steps, maybe an option to appeal, though there were scant grounds. Natalie didn't seem to register much of it. As we stood to leave, she suddenly spoke, her voice cutting through the murmurs in the courtroom. "Congratulations, Mike," she said, not loudly, but I heard the tremble in it. I turned to meet her gaze. Her eyes were overflowing with tears, and her tone was a mix of bitterness and heartbreak. "You got everything you wanted." A heavy silence fell between us. For a moment, I almost said something, I'm not sure what, but in the end, I simply nodded once, a curt, almost sorry, almost goodbye, and walked out with my attorney by my side. The divorce decree may have ended the legal battle, but the wreckage it left behind would linger for a long time. In the weeks after the court's decision, I watched the fallout of my meticulously executed revenge unfold. Natalie had 2 weeks to vacate what was now legally, once again, my house. She didn't contest it. She couldn't. One afternoon, I returned to the house, soon to be put on the market. I had no desire to live in that mausoleum of broken trust, to find her loading the last of her boxes into her car. We hadn't spoken since the courtroom. I stood by silently as she struggled for a moment with a heavy box. Our eyes met fleetingly. There were no words left that wouldn't seem hollow or cruel. I made no move to help her. Eventually, she managed on her own, closed the trunk, and with a final haunted glance at me, she drove away. I heard later she moved in with her younger sister across town since affording a place on her own, especially without a steady job, would be difficult now. News of the affair and our dramatic divorce quietly spread through our social circles. I wasn't shy about letting the truth be known when mutual friends delicately inquired what happened. I kept it factual. Natalie cheated, I found out, and we divorced. The details, of course, were far more sordid and dark, but I let people fill those in as they pleased. Many of our friends reacted with shock. A few who'd known us both took my side unequivocally, cutting off contact with Natalie. One or two tried to stay neutral, but the awkwardness was too much. In the end, her phone grew quiet and mine did too. The couple that used to host game nights and attend barbecues was no more, and people naturally drifted away from the uncomfortable mess left behind. Her parents reached out to me once, a week after the ruling. Her father, voice heavy on the phone, told me he was sorry for everything. They were devout folks, and the betrayal didn't sit easily with them. I could hear the disappointment and sadness. They had loved me like a son, and now they were grappling with the dual loss of a son-in-law and the image of the daughter they thought they knew. I assured him as politely as I could that while I appreciated the call, I preferred not to stay in touch. It was too painful and complicated. He understood. I suspect Natalie's relationship with her family became strained after that. They didn't disown her. Blood is blood. But I know her mother well enough to guess that forgiveness would not come easily. As for Eric, the fallout hit him hard as well. His wife of 10 years had promptly filed for divorce upon learning of the affair. I might have had a hand in ensuring she found out, anonymously mailing those damning hotel photos to their home address. The last I heard, he was fighting to see his kids and trying to salvage any kind of career after being ousted from his firm. In the quiet vindictiveness of my mind, I ticked off his ruin as another accomplishment. He paid a steep price for his part in this saga. Yet, for all the ruin I'd wrought around me, I didn't emerge unscathed. There were nights I awoke in my new apartment, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding with a sense of emptiness that the victory didn't fill. I'd stare at the ceiling, the silence pressing in, and realize I was utterly alone. There was no one sleeping beside me, no one to come home to with stories of my day or a simple hug. I'd won the war, but the home I had defended was already burned to the ground. I sold the house not long after, as I'd planned. Walking through its vacant rooms one last time was eerie. The echoes of our laughter, our arguments, our everyday life there still seemed to cling to the walls. In the corner of what was once our living room, a bit of tinsel from the Christmas tree remained wedged in the hardwood floor, a tiny glint of what had been. I picked it up and turned it between my fingers, remembering how Natalie had smiled at me that day as she decorated, believing we still had a future. A flood of emotions threatened to surface: sorrow, regret, nostalgia. I crushed the tinsel in my fist until it was a crumpled ball and tossed it aside. Then I left the house without looking back, locking away those memories for good. Financially, I was virtually untouched. The prenup ensured that. Our joint accounts were split, but I'd long since moved most funds into my name when the trouble began. The equitable offset the judge gave her for the house was so small, I wired it to her through my lawyer the next day without comment. It was a footnote in my balance sheet, but I imagined for her, it was a lifeline. Maybe the only thing enabling her to afford a down payment on a tiny rental or a used car. Part of me was tempted to be spiteful even in that, to delay payment or make it difficult, but I resisted such pettiness. I'd made my point. In the following months, I threw myself into work. Those close to me, like my assistant and a few colleagues, knew I'd gone through a nasty divorce, and they respected my silence on it. I could sense a few looking at me with curious pity at company events, a couple of higher-ups who knew Natalie socially offered polite, awkward condolences about things not working out. I responded with a tight smile and moved on. Privately, I wondered how many of them knew the real story and what they thought of me if they did. Did they see me as a wronged man who righteously stood up for himself, or a cold-blooded strategist who crushed his wife when she was down? It shouldn't matter, I told myself, but in the dead of night, that question sometimes haunted me. One evening, about 6 months after it was all over, I found myself parked outside a modest apartment complex on the other side of town. I had no clear memory of driving there. I'd been on a long, aimless drive to clear my head and ended up at that address almost by instinct. It was where Natalie was living now, according to a mutual acquaintance. I spotted her car, older, a little battered, parked in the lot. Lights were on in one of the upstairs units. I imagined her inside, maybe alone, maybe with the TV for company, rebuilding some semblance of a life. Perhaps she was dating, or perhaps the ordeal left her as mistrustful and guarded as it had left me. I didn't go in or announce my presence. I just sat there, grappling with a swirl of feelings. I thought about stepping out, knocking on her door, just to, I don't know, talk, ensure she was surviving. But to what end? I'd chosen a path of no return. There was no room for compassion now without undermining everything I'd fought for. As I sat there, I realized I felt no urge to forgive, no urge to reignite any connection. If I was looking for closure, I already had it. It was the cold, signed and sealed closure of a judge's order and the scorched earth I left behind. Nothing I could say to her now would change what happened or bring any peace that I hadn't already seized for myself. I drove away without ever turning off the engine. The past stayed in the rearview mirror, one fading set of lights among many on the dark highway. Today, I stand on the other side of that dark chapter. By outward appearances, I've moved on. I'm that successful man, unmarred by a costly divorce, free to live life on my terms. But the mirror shows a different truth each morning. There's a hardness in my eyes that wasn't there a year ago, a certain tightness to my smile that I doubt will ever fully relax. I carry the knowledge of what I'm capable of when pushed, both a source of pride and a quiet alarm. People often say revenge doesn't truly satisfy, that it won't heal the wound inside. In my experience, revenge was never about healing. It was about retribution, about balance. Natalie broke something sacred, and I made sure she paid for it. On that score, I have no regrets. The scales have been set right, in my view. Yet, if I'm honest, there is an emptiness too. A part of me died in that fire I lit. The loving husband, the trusting partner. That version of me is gone. What remains is a man who now knows too well the dark roads he can travel. As I close the book on this chapter of my life, I wear my scars under my suit and tie, invisible to the casual eye. In the silence of my own company, I sometimes replay it all, seeking the moment I could have chosen a different path. But each time I come to the same conclusion. Given the hand I was dealt, I would do it all over again. Perhaps that is the most haunting realization of all. In the end, there is no reconciliation to be found here, no gentle reunion or forgiving embrace. There is only the cold comfort of justice served and the quiet, persistent ache of everything lost along the way. And as I step forward into whatever comes next, that is what I carry with me. The assurance that I did not bow, I did not break, and the knowledge that the man I was, for better or worse, has been forged into someone new by the flames of betrayal and vengeance.